All right, good morning. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the morning session today, this beautiful Saturday morning. And today we're going to be talking about leapfrogging into the digital era. So I'm going to be your host for this first session. My name is Garikai Nongo, and I'm with Smart Africa. So one thing that we can promise you is that this is going to be a great session. We're going to have eminent speakers that are going to talk to us about how we can tap into the digital economy. And this digital economy is growing at an exponential rate. What we understand is that over the next 2 decades, 20 million young people are going to be entering the job market. We also understand that 42% of the world's youth population will be in Africa. Further to that, 230 million jobs across the continent will require digital skills. So this session is meant to answer the question, where do we fit into this entire matrix? And so hopefully we'll be able to answer that question, and probably we'll be able to engage deeper after this. But without taking more of your time, we're going to open with the first keynote of this particular session. So put your hands together and help me to welcome the Honorable Minister of ICT and Innovation, Honorable Minister Paula Ingavire. Minister, over to you.
Good morning. Good morning. I need to feel the energy because I had to do a very long walk to be to the front. Distinguished guests, ministers present here today, the youth of Africa, good morning once again. I'm very privileged to be with you this morning, and I know the topic that is going to be in discussion very shortly is something that is very dear and close, not just to the work that I do, but also something that I feel is very essential for the continent and for the respective countries as we think about development. And we all know that technology is an indispensable tool in the digital era that we live in today. And as young people, I think this resonates very well with you, especially because I can imagine none of you in this room can spend a day without checking on any of their smart devices. The digital era has sparked remarkable and exceptional progress in our development. And I know while we have a very good lineup of speakers that are going to be engaging with you this morning, talking about the opportunities that the digital era presents to us, but also more or less speaking to us about what it's going to take to leapfrog in this digital era, I'm very convinced that as they speak today, we're going to be speaking to the converted, because statistics show us that the youth, and very much so the youth in Africa, are the ones that are at the forefront of using and benefiting from digital tools and technology. But most importantly, a lot of efforts have been put in how do we bridge access? How do we ensure that every African across the board is connected, is living in areas of coverage? But we know that that is not enough, and that's why today's topic is very important, which is really around digital skills. We'll hear about many programs, about many initiatives that are in place that give us the opportunity to skill our people, the opportunities to skill ourselves, the opportunities to make sure that we can thrive in this digital economy. But what I want to speak to you today, which is why I'll keep my remarks very brief this morning, is with all these platforms that we have, with all the opportunities that we'll hear more about, that are there and present for us to skill and to become digitally literate, how can we, as the youth of Africa, leverage the platforms, the internet, to self-teach? Because that is possible. We all don't have to go to school to get the necessary basic digital literacy skills that we require. We may not be enrolled in all the programs that we'll hear about later today, but I think we have a very enormous opportunity that we have the internet, we have the basic devices that we can use to skill ourselves. What is also important is And starting from yesterday and the day before yesterday, when Youth Connect was launched, or when we had our very opening session, we heard of different statistics around the need for digital skills in every job. Not only have we heard, we've read, but we're also living in those times where every job that you can think about is being disrupted by technology, which means that digital skills are going to be a life skill in every profession, a life skill to survive, a life skill to thrive in the digital economy. And as we think about the potential of Africa leading the way, but also the youth of Africa leading the transformation that the continent wants to get to, I hope that as we live here, everyone in your different domains, in your different professions, in everything that you're passionate about, you go away with one resolve to ensure that whether it's the people you employ, whether it's the people you work with, how do we ensure that they have the minimum basic digital literacy skills that are required for them to benefit and leverage the platforms, the tools, the services that are consistently being digitized across the different countries. And once we can get that, and I like to say that even if you have all the money, you can build the infrastructure, you can digitize all the services, you can build all the e-commerce platforms and make sure all SMEs go digital, but skills is something that you don't build overnight. And that's why it requires that consistent and deliberate effort to make sure that we are skilling ourselves and we're ensuring that we have the minimum skills that are required for us to benefit in this era. So that's what I want to leave with you today, and without taking much of the time, I look forward to sharing more with you and hearing and learning more of the different initiatives that we can all benefit from as we put digital skills at the forefront, but also at the center of all the initiatives that we are undertaking in our respective portfolios. I thank you very much.
Another round of applause, please. The Honourable Minister has set the pace. I think we are inspired. We've got a sense of the direction that we need to go. But I think before we open the panel, let's add another sprinkle of more inspiration. So joining us on the screen, we're going to have an address from the former Prime Minister of Great Britain and Northern Ireland and the Executive Chairman of the Tony Blair Institute. Ladies and gentlemen, His Excellency, former Prime Minister Tony Blair.
Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, and of course our youth. It's a privilege to be addressing you in the opening session focused on the very pertinent and current issue of the benefits of digital transformation for Africa and its youth. The distinguished panel in this session will discuss various facets of this topic, and in particular, why it is absolutely necessary for Africa to continue leapfrogging into the digital era. So this is my 2 cents or 2 pennies on the matter. Number one, technology defines the modern world. You need only look around to see the revolutionary shifts that are taking place at the level both of our personal lives and entire nation states to know that this is a fact. The tech revolution is enabling step changes in access to markets, delivery of healthcare, advances in food production, provision of education, and bringing government services closer to the citizen. All of these things that were unimaginable a few years ago. As this rapid pace of technological change continues, aided by decentralizing technology, the world is becoming more interconnected and more interdependent. The traditional development paradigm, global north gives to global south, incremental change, zero sum, all of that's been turned on its head. Innovations are emerging across the world, with many happening in countries in the global south, leapfrogging the legacy systems and digitizing faster than those in the global north. The impact this can have on global inequalities, leveling the playing field or widening the divide, will be determined by the critical infrastructure and the supporting policy frameworks that countries have in place. If for no other reason than to remain competitive, African countries must continue investing in efforts that enable the continent to keep leapfrogging ahead on the economic, social, and transformative government's ambitions and plans because of technology. My advice would be to focus on continued investments in 3 key foundational areas. 1, continued investments in technology, connectivity, data, and device infrastructure. 2, continued efforts in skilling, upskilling, and reskilling Africa's youth for the future of work. And 3, continued movement on enabling and transformative governance. That means policies and the legal environment necessary for our young people to take advantage of the possibilities of tomorrow's economy. Technologies such as digital identity, data centers, cloud infrastructure, enterprise systems enabling access to basic services in government, these are going to be absolutely necessary cornerstones to achieve our ambitions. The connectivity status is improving globally, but Africa still lags a bit behind. Recent estimates by the ITU paint an increasingly positive picture that approximately 4.9 billion people, or 63% of the world's population, were connected by 2021. But 2.9 billion people worldwide are still offline, the majority of whom are African youth. So while almost 70% of the world's youth are using the internet, only 20% of Africa's female population is using the internet compared to 37% of its male population. So Africa's young women are the most severely disadvantaged globally where connectivity and access to devices is concerned. And what this means, of course, is that our young people in Africa miss out on the opportunities to make their lives better through participating in the global digital economy. And they also miss out on accessing basic government services, accessing information and jobs that will make their lives and the lives of those that depend on them better. Equipping our youth for the future of work starts right at the school level. At my institute, we recently proposed the creation of a World Education Service to ensure that every child in the world has access to the best digital tools, free of charge, to build their foundational learning. We are already supporting governments we work with to explore this ambition and are keen to continue sparking conversations with like-minded partners. It's true African governments are investing in skilling, upskilling, and reskilling Africa's youth, but we need to do more. As we leapfrog to enable the entrepreneurs that form our youth, we must continue efforts on growing our digital economies around 4 pillars: digital skills, digital platforms, digital entrepreneurship, and mitigating against the inequity that our progress in the above could fuel if we do not think cleverly about mitigating the digital divide. On transformative governance, we at the Institute hold the core belief that transformational change will be accelerated when leaders and policymakers are partnered with innovators to deliver change for their people. We have a specific program for this with governments called the Tomorrow Partnership. So political leaders and governments must work to bring tech and digital solutions to their biggest challenges, because the future will belong to those who responsibly harness the power of technology for the good of all and leave no one behind. Governments, of course, cannot achieve these digital transformation ambitions alone. There is need for close collaboration between government and the private sector to encourage and sustain investments in building the necessary infrastructure, skilling our youth, and putting in place the policies through inclusive and consultative processes. In ending, the bottom line is that technology and digital-based transformations, like any reform process, can be complex. This is therefore why we must leverage the trifactor of policy, advisory, and effective delivery to tackle the challenges we face as we continue to use technology to empower our youth. Much has been done, but much more remains to be done. To paraphrase Minister Paula Ingabire, we used to say the digital future is coming, we must prepare for it. Now we must accept that the digital future is here and we have to deal with it now. With this, I wish you a fruitful panel discussion, and I'll be following the outcomes of the Youth Connect Summit 2022 most keenly for the lessons we will learn as we share our experiences and hear from our youth on what we should be doing. Thank you.
I think this deserves another round of applause. So it's amazing to see such a full house today. And for the next 45 minutes, we're going to dissect what it means to leapfrog into the digital era. Now I have the distinct honor of welcoming distinguished panelists who are going to sit with us here today. We've got limited time, so I'm just going to, I won't take too much time with introductions, but they will introduce themselves as they speak to you. So help me to welcome the CEO of the Africa Leadership Group, Fred Swanica. Please take a seat on my immediate left. I'll also call upon Didier Nguyiki Yimfura, the Senior Director of Strategy and Growth at Smart Africa. We are honored to have with us the Country Director of the MasterCard Foundation, Rika Rigwamba. We also have in our midst a man who needs no introduction. Help me to welcome Kevin Frey, the CEO of Generation Unlimited. In addition to that, we have an inspired entrepreneur who's representing Solve IT, Joseph Semafara. Joseph, you can take the seat to your left. And the last panelist that we'll have is the Honorable Minister of Youth from Gambia. That's the Honorable Minister Bakari Baji. Honorable Minister, the seat is yours. All right, I've kicked open the timer. We've got 45 minutes just to make sure that we cover as much as we can. But the purpose of this panel really is we've got a full house here today, and what the people in this room want to understand is what does this leapfrogging into the digital era mean for them? So let's see if we can unpack that within the 45 minutes that we have. Honorable Minister, can I start with you with the first question? Because when we talk about leapfrogging, I think that's a term that everyone uses quite liberally, actually. But what exactly do we mean when we're talking about the youth leapfrogging into the digital era?
Good morning. And, well, my name is Bakari Baji. I'm the Minister of Youth and Sports of the Republic of the Gambia. Well, the topic is leapfrogging is, of course, understanding that in Africa, like we just heard from Tony Blair, we are lagging behind when it comes to getting ourselves involved in terms of getting access to the digital era. So the leapfrogging is how do we slowly but surely get into that area or that time when our African young people, our African businesses will have access to the digital era. And that would mean creating the infrastructure that is needed to have access to internet across the countries where we come from. But that also starts from ensuring that we change our education system to be able to prepare our young people, our children, from primary school to secondary school to tertiary education, to prepare them for that time when they will be able to have, be able to use the mobile phones and other things. But also developing our fiber optics across our countries by ensuring the infrastructure is in place, the electricity that is needed, and all the other infrastructure that is needed. And finally, how do we ensure that there is closer collaboration between the government and the private sector so that we can be able to have our young people access the internet and all the facilities that are needed to be able to do trade, to be able to learn, to be able to develop their skills and all the other areas where our young people need to develop. So in summary, this is what I think is needed to be able to leapfrog into the digital era, focusing on supporting our young people to have that access.
Thank you very much for that, Honourable Minister. You've talked about skills, you've talked about infrastructure, but you've also talked about access. Now, Didier, I'm coming to you with the work that you do at Smart Africa, because surely we cannot leapfrog into the digital era if the young people are not connected, and under 40% of Africa has access to broadband. So how can we truly tap into this digital transformation? How can we ensure that we connect Africa's youth?
Thank you. Good morning. It's a pleasure to be part of this important discussion. My name is Didier Ngwikinfo. I'm heading Strategy and Growth at Smart Africa, literally growing the impact of what Smart Africa is doing. For those who never heard about Smart Africa, it's a Pan-African organization chaired by President Kagame at the board, and which represent over 1 billion market today in 35 countries. So this question that have just been posed by our moderator today is very important, because we cannot talk about opportunities and future opportunities for the youth especially without talking about digitalization. Today, Africa represents over 1.2 billion people, and connectivity literally connects us to the rest of the world and the opportunities which are available in the world. Now, do you know that by 2050, the population is going to double? The total population will reach almost 2.5 billion people, and about half of the population in the world will be from Africa. On top of it, just in a few years, young Africans are expected to make 42% of the total youth in the world, and 75% in Africa will be youth. So we cannot talk about the future of youth without talking about connectivity. We've gone a long way with regard to connectivity. Just about 15 years ago, the continent was totally unconnected. The first initiative was really to bring connectivity around the African continent, but it goes beyond the submarine cable, the connectivity around the continent. It's really meaning broadband connectivity, not just connectivity, because you can have a very basic connectivity and that doesn't give you the experience or the ability to really transact online. So here, just to be sure, we're not talking about just internet, we're talking about broadband connectivity. But that's not enough. Connectivity is important, broadband connectivity is important. Affordability is an important component. If the cost of internet is expensive and you cannot afford to use it every day, it's still hampering you or us to really leverage what connectivity can give us. So at Smart Africa, we've been working on various initiatives to make affordability, to make connectivity affordable. Recently, we started an initiative to do a bulk purchase of connectivity so that we can reduce the cost of internet by 90%, 90. Some countries started it, and I hope that people in the room here in the next few years will be able to access the internet in a very affordable way, but also secure. Because as you know, the internet has a lot of opportunities, but also, sadly, there's also challenges as far as online security is concerned. Secondly, another initiative that we do, we're working to interconnect countries, because I'll give you an analogy like the airline industry today. If you leave Rwanda and you go to Cote d'Ivoire, most likely you go to France, or you'll go to the UK or to Amsterdam before coming back to Cote d'Ivoire. Why? Because we don't have enough interconnectivity as far as the airline industry is concerned. So what we're doing, we're working with countries to create more interconnectivity between countries, because we realize that countries are not sufficiently interconnected. So when you write a message, when you call, most likely your call will first go to Amsterdam or to the UK, a phone call. You'll not know it because it takes only a few milliseconds or a few seconds before it connects. But that's really a missed opportunity, because those are billions of dollars which are going out of the continent. So we want to create more connectivity in Africa, and there's another initiative that is called Smart Africa Continental Backbone that we are currently leading. I'll probably stop here. There are a lot of more initiatives that we can talk about that touch various aspects of connectivity. But I'd like just to also take the opportunity to invite all of us here, especially the youth, because I'm sure in this room we have over the majority of the youth. Let's not only be on the usage side, because today with platform we use a lot of tools. I'm sure in the morning, the first thing most of you open WhatsApp to check if there is a message or check your Instagram or your Facebook. But let's also be on creating because we have so much talent, we have so much to offer. And connectivity is important, but let's also be the one creating products that can also be used by the rest of the world, not only in Africa.
Thank you very much for that, Didier. And I think an applause, absolutely, absolutely. Because you've given us a lot to pick up on, and I think one of the biggest things was if we're able to indeed reduce the cost of broadband by 90%, that'll be incredible for all the entrepreneurs that we're seeing here and across the entire continent. So let's latch on to that and say, let's say now that we would have delivered the connectivity, and then we've got these platforms that you've talked about. Surely we need the youth to have the right skills to be able to utilize this. Rika, I'm coming to you and the work that you do at the MasterCard Foundation. How important are you seeing skills development as a cog for this leapfrogging into the digital era?
Thank you. Thank you for that question. Absolutely, skills is very important, and I think the speakers earlier this morning mentioned that as one of the priorities. And maybe I'll speak a little bit about some of the work that we've been doing at the MasterCard Foundation. When we talk about leapfrogging, I think the pandemic made us all leapfrog. And so as part of that last year, we started a program, a COVID-19 resilience, recovery and resilience program. And through this, what we were looking at, among other things, was to see how we could bring in e-learning. Given that the schools were closed, it was very difficult for students to be able to continue learning. And in one of the initiatives specifically, we focused on the TVET sector, the technical and vocational training, with a partner, EDC. And we realized that a lot of these skills, TVET is around practical skills, and we didn't really have a means for students to be able to continue learning. And through this, what was done was really to develop e-programs, e-courses that would allow students at home to be able to continue learning. And two learnings that I thought I would share. One is the importance of working with the teachers, because sometimes people think about now it's all digital, that means student can do it on its own. But what it also means is that the way we teach and also training the teachers themselves to be able to be adaptable, but also to be able to develop a lot of these offline courses into online. And we saw the importance of that, and what this has enabled is that you're actually able to spread. You can now reach without being in one class, and you also are getting a bit of consistency. The second thing I'd like to talk about is the gender aspect of it, as an example. I think the importance of inclusion and think about women. I think it's former Prime Minister who talked about inclusion, and 20%, I think, if I heard it right, of female being really left behind. And this is really beyond the devices and the connectivity that we've been talking about, is that we see a lot of young women not being able to access a lot of this information. Through the program, having female teachers develop a lot of the audio lessons require them to also have some practical skills. And so if you're looking at, let's say, an electrician as a woman, and you're supposed to, go and change something and go on a ladder, it was very difficult to convince them to actually do that because of social norms. Like, this is weird to actually be filmed doing this. But what it also means is that if you're not able to see another woman doing it, then as young women, they don't actually have role models. And so I think for me what this is important is that even as we develop this, I think it's very important to think about inclusion and also of the optics. If we only do business as usual, we find a lot of men in this digital space, a little bit like this panel, And so I think it really will require a lot of intentionality about, as we leapfrog, how are we being very intentional? We're bringing young women at the table. And for young women as well, this is going actually can be an equalizer, but that requires for all of us to be intentional. We can all look at the same thing. And for those who are developing applications or other things, that the optics matter. The woman needs to see a fellow woman to be able to understand that this is also a product that speaks to her. So I think, absolutely, let's leapfrog, but do it in a way with equity, with inclusion from the design, and I think our young people will be ready for this digital world. Thank you.
Rika, thank you very much for that. I think one thing that you've spoken about, I think that we'll latch on to, which is critically important, is the inclusion of women, or at least closing that gender gap. I read a recent statistic that Africa is losing up to $1 trillion a year simply by excluding women. And I think this is something that we certainly need to address. Fred, I'm coming to you. I know you do a lot of work with the MasterCard Foundation as well, but I've got the same question for you. Should we be skilling? Why should we be skilling? And why is it important to skill?
Well, the why it's important to skill, for me, it's really about capturing one of the biggest global opportunities at this moment for Africa. There are 50 to 80 million jobs worldwide that are looking for people with technology skills. And China is getting old, India is getting old, Europe and America have been old for a while. Africa is the only young continent. So the only place that can supply this global shortage is really Africa. The average age of a German is 48, the average age of an African is 19. So this opportunity is really ours to lose. And today you can be a software engineer sitting in Kenya and working for Siemens in Germany. We can export our talent without the brain drain, right? And our talent is our greatest resource. It's not our gold, our diamonds, our minerals, it's our talent. So we have to be deliberate about investing in our youth and developing these digital skills to capture this opportunity. India generates $230 billion a year on foreign exchange by exporting its digital skills. 90% of that revenue comes from outside of India, right? So we have to become the next India, and we can create jobs for millions of youth in Africa, which is our single biggest problem that we have as a continent, but it's also our greatest opportunity. So that's why we have to do this. Opportunity. Let's create wealth. Let's stop depending on the rest of the continent, of the world for aid. This is our chance to really become a wealthy continent that can take care of ourselves. We can pave our own roads, educate our own children. We don't need to depend on the rest of the world for aid if we can do this. Now, how are we going to do this? This is where we need to reinvent and reimagine how we upskill. Because leapfrogging is about mindset more than anything else. It's not about, without the right mindset, we're not going anywhere. And it's really a mindset of saying that it's not about copying best practice from the rest of the world, but reimagining and reinventing new practice.
Right.
So imagine if you're on a race track and you're in a car that is behind another one. If you go at the same speed as that car, you'll never catch up. They'll always be ahead of you. So if they're using a car, you need a rocket. If they're using a boat, you need a speedboat. You need to go much faster and use new tools. And for me, the great opportunity comes from young people teaching themselves and teaching each other. Because as human beings, we've always been natural-born learners. Just think about it. There's no curriculum that teaches you how to walk. You learn it by yourself at 6 months. There's no curriculum that teaches you language. You teach yourself. But then when you go to school, grade 1, we start making you helpless. And we start spoon-feeding you. And then it gets worse and worse. And by the time you get to university, you are now completely helpless. So we need to take you back to your 6-month-old self, where you were teaching yourself, and then get together with your peers and teach each other. And that's the model. And we're leveraging that model. We've gone from, a year ago, we were training 50 engineers. Today, we're training 100,000 software engineers without any teachers. And we are going to train several million in the next 10 years using that model. So that's the opportunity. Information used to be scarce. Today, information is ubiquitous. So every young person can teach themselves, they can teach each other. And with this, we can really transform Africa.
No, that's truly inspirational. 100,000 software engineers being trained at the moment. Another round of applause for that. Thank you for that, Fred. Kevin, I saw you nodding your head furiously when Fred was talking about training the 100,000 software engineers. And let's talk about the how in terms of this skills development. You're doing incredible work, even across the continent. How do you think we can train the right skills to be able to leapfrog into the digital era?
Yeah, and I think exactly what Fred was saying when I saw that order of magnitude scale, that 100,000 going to millions to be trained, goes to the heart of the digital leapfrog that we're here to talk about. I think at the end of that digital connection that you were speaking about is a world of opportunity. And what this digital connection really does is it dissolves and removes borders and boundaries that used to exist. When I grew up, and there's probably a few folks on this stage from around my age group, the best teacher I could find is who I could reach with a bicycle. Maybe public transit, the best teacher in the village, the best teacher in the town. Maybe I could go to the big city to find a better teacher or professor. Now, sitting in my bedroom, I can get a certificate from the best universities in the world. Now, the top companies in the world, Microsoft, Google, SAP, are making certifications available to every young person on the planet. They don't need to travel. They don't need to get accepted to a prestigious university. The opportunities are all there, and they're there at scale. And like we heard from Fred, there's jobs, but the young people need to have the skills. So I think the game-changing leapfrog here is access to world-class learning, both from corporations and from institutions. I think that dissolution of borders, though, also works for entrepreneurs and for employment. I know, Fred, we talked a lot yesterday about the opportunities for remote work, so that, again, using a digital connectivity, being able to work across borders, entrepreneurs, finding customers across borders. We live in a very, very different world today, which I think is a world of global opportunity for the young people who are here today.
Thank you very much for that, Kevin. An applause, please. I hope the audience are taking the same notes that I am, because there are a lot of nuggets to take away. There are opportunities, and we need to tap into those. But let's talk to one person who is actually tapping into these opportunities. Joseph, I'm coming to you. You're an entrepreneur who's actually walking the talk. Are you seeing the opportunities that we're talking about across this panel?
Definitely, thank you. Thank you, my name is Joseph. I'm a founder of a company called Solvit Africa, a job creation company and training and outsourcing in tech industry. Talking about the opportunities that we're talking about on the panel, and by the way, I'm very happy to sit in the panel with some of my role models, because I grew up seeing technology moving, and to be honest, we're talking about a very interesting topic. If we're talking about leapfrogging, and we are after pandemic, during the pandemic, where everyone was forced to really boost in terms of digital era, because we are not allowed to hand over cash. You're pushed to use cashless system. What does that mean? It means the mobile money is going to be used. And again, we were in the position where you can't go to work. The only way that you're supposed to survive is if you have digital skills that you can do some of the remote work. So when the pandemic started, I think that's where we reflected, as my company, we reflected and think, how can we do things different way? And honestly, after that, I have outsourced more than 600 young developers globally, and now I have even 50 developers that are working in my office, working for international companies, Japan, US, and some of the countries they've never been in. So that means we don't need another pandemic to leapfrogging and jump and go into the digital world. We need to do it, and we need to know that it's possible, because we've seen it. We have, quoting Mr. Fred, he mentioned that Africa is the youngest market now, and we happen to be having a lot of youth who are especially not even employed. So the opportunity are there, and the numbers of jobs that mentioned is true. So how can we jump into that? It's by having these topics And we've seen young people, more than thousands, that are working from home and working for international businesses and the local businesses. So we've seen those opportunities, and they're still there. Thank you.
I'm motivated, I'm inspired, and I hope we are too. One of the things that every panelist here has talked about is how technology can transcend borders. Where, you're coming from a country with, 15 million people, all of a sudden you open up a market of 1.3 billion. I think all the panelists spoke about it. Didier, I'm coming to you for this one because I know Smart Africa's vision is to transform Africa into a single digital market. How is this possible? Is it possible? And how will it impact the young people here today?
We believe it's possible, and you just need to bring all the ingredients together. And this is part of the work we're doing. We focus on connectivity, as I mentioned earlier. We focus on skills, because the moment you have infrastructure, it's affordable, it's secure, it's not enough. You really need to have the right skills to take full advantage and to really leverage all this infrastructure in place. We're talking also about creating, and we're not doing it alone, of course, we're doing it with a lot of partners, the African Union, the African Continental Free Trade Area, enabling digital trade so that people can actually be able to trade and really beyond the geographical limitation of the country or the market, because as you know, it creates a lot of limitation, but the digital actually open up those opportunities. So you can create a company here, you can trade with someone who is in Egypt, in Morocco, in South Africa. All of this require a lot of transformation at the policy. I think the former Prime Minister mentioned it, policy and regulatory, and I'll give you a very, very simple example of what we're doing, which can already give a sense of why we believe it's possible. I'm sure most of you here, when you traveled, some of you have been roaming, and roaming has been very expensive. It's usually very expensive. We started an initiative that today has 14 countries that allow a reduced roaming rate. You call like at home at the same rate, almost the same rate as if you're calling when you're in your own country. A few years ago, it was totally impossible for it to happen. We work with all the countries. We started harmonizing the regulatory framework that was governing roaming. So what we want in the future is that when you travel to a country, from a country in Africa to another, you will not need to remove your SIM card and buy a local SIM card. With the very same SIM card, you'll be able to call, SMS, most importantly today, also be able to use your data, because data roaming is extremely, extremely expensive. That makes actually people to remove the SIM card and buy a new SIM card. So those are possible. Why? Because of the political will. At Smart Africa, we have 35 heads of state committed into this digital transformation, and it's a mix of bottom-up and top-down approach. From the leadership, they are committed to that. We have digital champions, our head of state, and we also work with the ministers, the regulators, the ICT agencies, but also the academia and the civil society development partners who are like-minded and who believe in the transformation of Africa. Now, it took us a lot of years to catch up with the revolution which took place in the past. We believe that in this fourth industrial revolution, it's actually possible to leapfrog and to take advantage of what has been offered to us. But it's not given. We need to really work very closely and make it a reality.
Thank you very much for that, Didier. I think that's excellent work that's taking place on the continent. And I think, like a former panelist said, we have to be intentional about this. And speaking about being intentional, Honorable Baji, I'm coming to you, because Didier mentioned that policy is a critical part of ensuring that we can allow people to leapfrog in the digital era. Maybe giving an example of the work that you're doing in the Gambia, what's government's role in ensuring that we create a conducive environment for us to be able to leapfrog?
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I think the bigger responsibility here is definitely that of government, because first, the policies themselves emanates from government, and like Fred mentioned, the policy environment must be there, and that policy is what will direct every other thing that comes in place. And so that is something that the government must have that political will to do, and ensuring that once the policy is there, then the regulation comes in, and everybody knows what is supposed to be the role of government and what is supposed to be the role of the private sector. And the policy also will direct in terms of ensuring that the stakeholders are protected, because, again, this is an industry that it has a lot of competition, and sometimes there are a lot of other issues that require regulation from the government side. So Africa as a continent, we have a long way to go, of course. I mean, even our fiber cable, like I said, from Africa it goes all the way to the west, and then it takes a whole long route before it comes back. So there must be that coordination between ourselves and the private sector, coordination between governments and the corporate world, but also that coordination between the government and the young people who here we are talking about how do they access. At the moment in Gambia, of course, is one of those countries also that is emerging, learning from the examples of what is currently happening in Rwanda and in Kenya, for instance, where the digital economy is taking over and young people are accessing and doing business and every other thing through the usage of those links that the country creates. So government's responsibility, like I said, is one about policies, about regulation, but it's also about the investment. Because yes, we might not have the resources, but there could be possibilities for governments to collaborate or governments to partner with the corporate institutions that are ready to invest in that area and ensure that we are not remaining behind, that we are moving forward and ensuring more access to our young people and general population. The last thing is about the infrastructure. I think we know how apart from the internet accessibility, there is a problem of electricity connectivity across the continent. So there is no way you can be able to digitalize, there's no way you can be able to develop that digital economy if majority of your people are not having access to electricity, neither are they having access to even a mobile phone. So these are all areas where governments in Africa need to work together to get the support of the World Banks, of the multilaterals, to ensure that we do better and be able to improve. Progress has happened, definitely, and over the past years since the digital era started, some 40 years ago, a lot of things have progressed, but there is more work that we need to do, and I guess that the leaders of Africa are committed to it with the support that we are having currently.
Honorable Minister, thank you very much for that. I've heard we need the infrastructure, and hopefully we'll have the time to be able to tap into that, because that's an important part. But I also heard collaboration and cooperation. Now, not many people do collaboration and cooperation better than the MasterCard Foundation. So, Rika, I'm coming to you on this because I think you've partnered even with a couple of us around the table, around the panel here. How do you see the power of partnerships being key for this leapfrogging for Africa's digital transformation?
No, I think it's absolutely key. When you look at just how big the challenge we're trying to resolve, we can only do that through partnership. And at the MasterCard Foundation, what we believe is that we have a lot of great minds. We have a lot of great organizations that are already doing this work, whether it's what the ambition Fred just shared, or even the work that Solvit is doing, and a lot of the work that the government of Rwanda is doing around that. And what our experience has been is that really what's needed is how do we work together, how do we coordinate, and how do we make sure that as an organization, as development partners, we're able to support through a curating role. And I think it's really going to take a lot of that collaboration to happen. But also critical is where is the young people, making sure that as we develop programs, as we work together, we make sure that we keep the young people at the center of it, because we found from our experience that young people have a perspective. And I like to use this quote quite a bit of young people basically saying, you're doing all these things for us, but can you also bring us on the table? And one of the ways of doing it is that if there are initiatives already by young people, whether it's it's great to have Solvit, because I know some of the work that they're doing here in Rwanda. These are young people who have come together, are bringing a lot of the skills that they've acquired, and are already doing a lot of great jobs. And really calling it the young people and making sure that we keep putting them at the center. One of the things we launched, for example, at this Youth Connect, and encourage young people here and older people like us, is a platform. We're calling it a Kura platform. This is an initiative with the Gihe. Gihe is one of the big media houses here in Rwanda. And Kura, which means grow, is basically responding to some of the things we've heard of young people basically saying, where are all these opportunities? And with this platform, we're able to share a lot of opportunities that are happening, a lot of the work that different people are doing, the opportunities for some of this gig work, and really encouraging people to go on the platform, to share some of the experiences, to also see some of the opportunities. So really encouraging everybody to go out there, make sure we are including the young people in these initiatives and sharing all these great things that are already happening so that they can actually take advantage of these opportunities.
Congratulations on the launch of Kura. I think that sounds exciting. Please, let's all tap into this. Let's all make sure that we access this. Thank you so much for that, Rika. Kevin, I'm coming to you, and I'm looking for inspiration and motivation in terms of the work that you've done, especially when we're talking about the opportunities to be able to, transcend borders. Give us some of the success stories that you have.
I think when it comes to transcending borders again, and going back to the idea of partnership here, where we've had some of our biggest success is bringing private sector together to work with public sector. And we're talking about global private sector players, some of the biggest corporations, again, in the world, who have extraordinary skilling content that they want to give away, and they want to give it away for free, but they need partners on the ground to do it. So whether that is Microsoft or SAP, PwC, Accenture, we're working with all of these companies right now. We have an initiative called the Passport to Earning. Again, those companies all involved giving away free skilling opportunity at scale. We launched last year. We'll have 10 million completed certificates across 15 countries by 2025. So again, big scale, working across continental boundaries, but working with the private sector who are hungry but need to be encouraged to continue to give away their world-class skilling content to empower youth of the future.
That's incredible. 10 million completed certificates by 2025. I think that's a big number. That's a bold statement. Thank you for that, Kevin. I think one of the things that we're learning in this panel is that it is possible. Fred, I'm coming to you with the same question because we're familiar with your work and you work across multiple borders. Where are the successes that we have at the moment in terms of our journey towards leapfrogging?
One of the great successes that I'm seeing and where I think there's a lot more we can do is in digitizing government. Because as citizens of Africa, very often our governments are hindrances to our daily life when they should really be removing roadblocks and making our lives easier. I'll give an example. For example, in Ghana, it used to take 1 to 2 years to get a passport. And you go to the passport office, and there's all sort of corruption happening there and paperwork, and because people liked it that way, right? There were vested interests. Eventually, the government digitized the passport office, and now you can get a passport in 3 weeks, and the government revenue went up by 56 times.
Wow.
Because of all the corruption that was now taken out of the system. So when you digitize, you create transparency, you reduce costs, you enable scale, and you can track whether services are being delivered to people or not, right? So I think government can digitize everything from getting a national ID to a passport to driver's license to e-health to e-education. So many things that can be delivered to citizens if we can digitize our governments.
Absolutely. I think that's absolutely low-hanging fruit, something that can be tapped into. We're coming to the end of our panel, so our panelists have one intervention left each, and Joseph, I'm starting with you. In 1 minute, inspire the audience. Let them leave with something that they hear from you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. One of the things that I will start with, however much the government and private sectors are doing whatever it takes to invest in human capacity, in human capital, training these youth, provide these certificates for free, my advice to youth is all of these are put together for us. Everything has been made available for us. MasterCard has mentioned the platform where the opportunities are launched. Don't be the last in class. Go out. Don't depend on academic credibilities. Don't depend on what university is offering only. Yes, it's good, pursue the degrees. But again, remember, everything doesn't belong at the campus of the university. Go out there, meet the opportunity, pursue the opportunity, reach out your goal. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. Honorable Minister, I'm coming to you. 1 minute to inspire the audience.
Well, just to say that that as a continent, we should believe in ourselves, that we should understand that the challenges are there, but the resources are available if we maximize what we have. And also to the young people, just to say that we should never despair, that we should always do our best to better ourselves and our communities. And that is possible only if we believe in who we are and believe in what is available within our communities and look around and utilize what is there. But of course, understanding that you're going to start small, but eventually will grow big, just like other countries are and around the continent are doing so well. So we just want to pass this message on to our young people to continue to believe and do their best.
Kevin, the floor is yours.
I don't know if this will be inspirational or not, but as someone who was an entrepreneur himself and had lots of dark days, a quote that always stuck with me was from a famous basketball player in the National Basketball Association who grew up not very athletic, a guy called Larry Bird, never should have been in the league, ended up being one of the greatest players of all time. Got his first uniform when he got to university. He used to have to play in the jeans from the farm where he came because he was so poor. And his quote that always stuck with me, because as we heard at the opening session, is you need a little bit of luck in life. But what he said is that the harder he worked, the luckier he got. The harder he worked, the luckier he got. Everybody here is going to need a little bit of luck. But the way to make your own luck is to keep working hard every single day. Some of you will find luck a little bit earlier, but luck will find you as long as you keep working hard.
The harder you work, the luckier you become. I like that. I'll hang on to that. Rika, I'm coming to you. 1 minute of inspiration to our audience.
That's a lot of pressure to inspire an audience like this. But I'm actually inspired by this audience. I think for the last few days that I've attended Youth Connect, I've seen the energy. And a lot of words are said about Africa's future is now. And I think when we say Africa's future, and we heard that it's not just future, you are today's leaders. And so all I can say is for Africa's future and great future to be now, it would take all of you. And so we're counting on you, and I'm sure you can do it.
Africa's future is now. I think that's a powerful statement. Didier, your minute starts now.
Thank you. I'll just piggyback to what Rika said, and just to say that we say the future is now. Sometimes we think opportunities are very far, and we wait for those opportunities to come or have the best framework, the best policy, everything to be in place to seize those opportunities. But if you really open your eyes, you realize that there are a lot of opportunities around you. We will see, and I'm weighing my words here. A lot of important changes happening in our lifetime, and youth, it's your time, it's your opportunity, seize them. And I finish by saying that it's either you're sitting at the table or you're at the menu, right? So I hope people here will not just end up being at the menu, but you can really unleash the opportunity, unleash your creativity, your innovation, and really take active part of the transformation we are talking about here and seizing the opportunities which are offered to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Didier. Either you're sitting at the table or you're on the menu. Fred, your minute starts now.
For me, I would say to the young people in the audience, the world is literally your oyster now. Before, when you were looking for a job, you would complain about there's no jobs in Rwanda, there's no jobs in Kenya, there's no jobs in Nigeria. And you're waiting for the local economy to grow, you're waiting for the local government to do things. But today, thanks to technology and this digital revolution and the massive shortage of technology talent, you have now access to hundreds of countries around the world. You can earn foreign exchange, you can get paid, you can work in Ghana, in London, in New York, in San Francisco without leaving your house. And you don't have to risk your life going through the Sahara Desert and going through, all those oceans to get there. You can just live in your country, earn a lot of money, but now it's up to you to get those skills so you can play on the global stage.
I'm absolutely inspired. A round of applause for our panelists. Now, as we close this panel, please allow me to welcome for our closing remarks the Honorable Deputy Minister of Youth Development from Liberia, the Honorable Isaac Joe. Honorable Minister.
Wow, great time to be in Rwanda. The Honorable Rose Mary Mamazi, host Minister of Youth here in Rwanda, other countries' ministers in charge of youth, especially my own Honorable Peter Bema, who is the Minister in charge of youth from the angle of TVET of Liberia, diplomats, special guests, youth and youth leaders, members of the press, ladies and gentlemen. A lot is often said about and for young people, even from right here at this year's summit. But how much of what is often said is replicated in actions? It is a good thing to have our continent now focused on young people, because the continent has since realized that without young people's involvement in our national development, all of us are doomed not to prosper. With these facts that we all seem to believe, how are these things manifested in things that we as a continent do? In my country, Liberia, for instance, thanks to His Excellency, the President, Dr. George Weah, who has placed tremendous hope and belief in young people, for which many of us, including myself today, occupy top government levels positions. The question is, how many more of this can we say across this continent? If indeed our words must match our actions, our investments as continent, including from our national budgets, must be representative of the young people that we all believe are the cornerstone of this great continent. We must invest in entrepreneurship, in education, in business, and many more. The world today is moved on to the digitalized era, started many, many, many decades ago by many other countries. Africa, being far behind this fray, must take steps that leapfrogs this continent into right at the center of this era. If nothing has ever taught us a lesson, making us to believe that digitalizing our economy and our society should be a matter of urgency, we all agree that the COVID-19 pandemic, during when the entire world was at a standstill from the outside, but needed to still be moving on from the inside, should be a lesson for all of us. Again, to end, great panel discussions, great young people of Africa, potential energies. Hopefully these things can be replicated, not just in words, but in the actions that we take. I want to, on behalf of my own president and my ministers and everyone else from Liberia, express thanks and appreciation to the organizers, especially our host minister, Rose Mary, and of course, Your Excellency, the President of Rwanda. Thank you so much for this great opportunity, and I hope this summit was a pleasure and everyone did enjoy it. I thank you.
A round of applause for the Honorable Minister. Thank you to the panelists. You've been an amazing panel. Thank you to the audience. You've been an incredible audience. Let's leave inspired and let's ensure that our time is now. Thank you very much.